Hello, I'm Karma Q'eqchi, and I'm your host for A Livelihood, New Adventures as We Age. Today I'm going to introduce you to Ava Berinstein, and Ava is, well, she's a jeweler now, but she has a very interesting history because years ago she was doing research in Guatemala, and she has gone back to doing some things that she started 30 years ago. Hello.
Hello. It's nice to be here. Thank you very much.
So we need to talk about your love for the Mayan culture.
Yes.
And that started many years ago when you were a graduate student in linguistics and spent a lot of time in Guatemala gathering the oral tradition, stories from people. So tell us something about that.
Well, as a graduate student at UCLA, I was working on the description of a language called Qeqchi, which is a Mayan language of the Q'eqchi
Of which there
branch.
are many languages,
There
right?
are 29 extant Mayan languages spoken at this time. Qeqchi is a language in the Q'eqian branch, and it's primarily spoken in Coban, in the highlands of Guatemala, in Alta Verapaz. And that's where I did my field work for over 4 years. And my dissertation is a grammar of that language. But to write the grammar and the principles of that govern the syntax, I collected stories so that I would have natural speech and discourse to work from.
So it's not a written language, you said, correct?
No. And what's precious about the stories is that the oral tradition is how one preserves the language and culture and passes it down from generation to generation. Now, what's happening now and over the many years is that the elders, Mayan priests and others, who typically would tell these stories, the elders are dying. And the tradition of verbal art, this verbal art, is approaching extinction. When a tradition approaches extinction that is carrying down the values and customs and history of a culture, that's an indicator that can lead to basically the extinction of a culture, because you have customs that aren't being passed down to the next generation. And those variables have been identified as characteristic of language shift. It's when when a lot of those things happen, you are at risk of losing that language, and and then that's very, it's not something you can just get back.
So now, I know, Ava, that you have a story that you brought with you.
I did.
That you've translated, and let's hear that story.
Okay, great. So I've collected many stories. 18 stories are in my collection. This is one, and this story is called The Dance of the Deer. It was told by a gentleman who was in his mid-50s. And his name is Francisco Choco'oj Paau. He's from Coban, Guatemala. And he told me the story because I asked him about the Dance of the Deer. It's a dance that is still performed, and I wanted to understand the symbolism behind it.
And we have some lovely pictures that depict this story, too.
We do.
And you want to mention the artist's name?
I do. The artwork was painted by an artist. The name is Grant Swados, S-W-A-D-O-S, and Grant illustrated the 3 verses that that I'm going to read here about the Dance of the Deer.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. The Qeqchi is below, so I'll just read the English. Okay. The Dance of the Deer. It's Lach Shachol Kek. What is the meaning behind the Dance of the Deer? Here in the region of Alta Verapaz, Guatemala, the deer dance represents a particular symbol. According to our ancestors, there was a time when our native land was very dry. Each of the holy plants, the holy trees, and the bushes began to dry out. Each of the animals began to die because of the drought. All the animals, the tigers, the monkeys, the raccoons, and the deer, understood how it was. They noticed that it was terribly dry and that those among them were dying. They thought that they would ask the divine Sultaqa, the one who judges in the world, that he might do us the favor, that he might grant us our water. All of the animals did it. They gathered together and elected the deer to represent their commission to San Pablo Xucanep, so that he might petition Lord Sultaqa, who might grant us our drink. That's the way they did it. The deer represented the animals, and they prepared themselves for their journey to San Pablo Xucanep to ask that he do their petition. When they arrived at the crossroads, the deer found themselves in danger when tigers threw themselves upon them. The deer needed to do their errand in San Pablo. They realized that they were in the tiger's claws. They thought, who should they ask to help them there in the mountains? They called the monkeys who lived nearby in the hope they might come to their rescue. The monkeys came. In their agility, they began to tease the tigers. They began to pull on the tigers' tails. They were fooling and tricking them so that there would be time for the deer to escape and go to do their petition before Sultaqa. That is what they did. They arrived at San Pablo Xucanep in good time. They did their petition. Sultaqa came and granted the water. He gave the animals their drink. All of them were saved there. That is the reason why the symbolic deer dance was created in our community.
Good. Okay, and so we have a picture of the mask.
Yes, the deer mask that is
deer
actually
mask.
used in the dance. It's a very big, heavy, wood-carved deer mask that they wear on top of their heads.
Right.
And there's another picture there that you'll see of the deer dancers wearing these masks and in full costume with very ornate, colorful capes, with a marimba behind them, playing music. And this dance is still performed at the Pabang Festival and other festivals. And it's indicative of, again, this petition to Sultaqa, which is one of the biggest mountains, and it looms over Coban. And it is a deity in terms of, their beliefs. And so whenever you do anything, if you're going to pick your corn or plant your corn, you go to Sultaqa and you ask for permission to do so before planting or before picking the corn, or else bad things can happen to you. And so it's very relevant that this story has in it all of these aspects that are still so much believed and practiced in the community to this day.
Okay, so we have only a couple of minutes left, Ava, and I just want to make sure that you talk about how this has all come full circle for you and what you're going to be trying to do with these stories.
Thank you. So it has come full circle for me, and what we're trying to do now is, in collaboration with Cultural Survival, which is a small nonprofit in Cambridge. Their website is culturalsurvival.org. Their mission is the revitalization of languages and culture as well. And of course, that intersects with my own personal mission, which is the revitalization of Mayan language and culture. And together with Mark Camp, who's the director of the Guatemalan Radio Project at Cultural Survival, we've submitted some proposals so that not only can we repatriate these stories and bring them back to the Mayas in Guatemala where they belong, rather than in my moldy basement, but we intend not only to publish and repatriate the stories, but the Cultural Survival has a very important program called the Guatemalan Radio Project. And that project in Guatemala is completely staffed by volunteers and indigenous Mayas, where they have community-based radio stations running on 500-watt transmissions, basically in a hut, where they're transmitting and broadcasting important information in indigenous languages about culture and customs and history and other important information that Mayas need in their own language. And what we hope to do, and what our proposal hopes to do, is to broadcast the original versions of these stories, which I collected in 1978. So these people are no longer alive in many cases, and some of these legends are very, very historical and have some very, some cultural importance of great magnitude, actually, and they haven't otherwise been told. So this would be a way to broadcast the stories, and when people hear them, we hope to ask them if they've heard other stories like that, or if they remember their parents telling them stories like that, and if they would like to come in and tell their stories. So the whole idea is to broadcast the stories, but also to ask people to contribute their stories and collect new speech genres and create an archive of stories so that we can understand what's happening now, as well as revitalize the language and culture through radio. And so that's what we're trying to do at this point through Mayan folklore.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. Yeah, I wish you good luck with that.
Thank you.
So we're going to have to stop.
Okay.
And thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. I've appreciated this very much. It's a pleasure.